Good evening, everyone. As most of you know, my name is Amy Skillman, and I'm the director of the MA in Cultural Sustainability at Goucher College. I'm so pleased to welcome you to the fourth session in our chatFEST series of online conversations with sustainability activists. I want to begin by thanking Amy Millen and Cecilia Ottenweller, who were my colleagues and co-conspirators in planning this series. We've had a blast designing the conversations and thinking about who to pair up with whom and what that would look like. And we hope that you've been enjoying them as much as we have. This is our last session in the spring series, but we are working on a fall series and we'll be announcing those soon. So stay tuned and stay in touch. Some quick reminders. Closed captioning is available. If you click the CC button at the bottom of your screen, you should be able to enable closed captioning. As I mentioned, we are recording this. Please keep your microphone on mute, and you can put your setting on speaker view at the beginning until we open up for questions and comments from all of you at the end. And just as a reminder, for those of you who've visited us before for these sessions, these are designed as conversations with some opening remarks by our speakers, but then a moderated dialogue. And we've specifically called it a chatFEST. So in order for you all to feel encouraged to communicate with each other using the chat function in Zoom. So feel free to chat away. And if you like, you can begin by chatting something about who you are and why you're here. And in the meantime, I will get us started with an overview. The concept of sustainability foregrounds social movements around the world these days. We here in the MAX program understand sustainability as the ability of people and the natural world to coexist equitably on Earth over time. But the processes of climate change, war, globalization, and gentrification, among others, really conspire to threaten this ability. And yet resistance to sustainability goals seems to have risen. It's on the rise, often seen as a conspiracy for taking away freedoms or property rights. Communication is critical in this time if we are to move forward with more sustainable ways of being on the planet. chatFEST, this series, builds on ideas and conversations from our 2022 International Conference on Communicating Sustainabilities. And I think Amy Millen is going to put a link in the chat that would take you to a page on our website that has access to all the recordings. There you go. For anybody who missed that, you can listen, you can watch those recordings. But anyway, this chatFEST series builds from that conference to create conversations with artists and scholars and community leaders exploring innovative and diverse ways to communicate the value of sustainable practices. We've had 3 really great conversations so far, and we will be, if you're enrolled or registered for this series, you should be getting access to those recordings. We'll let you know where you can find them shortly. But tonight's theme is communicating significance with the question, can art and culture influence public policy? Change is often about policy making, whether at the local, national, or global level. So in this conversation, we'll be talking with artists and community leaders who have explored the role of art in changing perceptions and addressing public policy. In particular, how do we communicate the significance of these critical artistic and cultural traditions? And I'm especially excited about these individuals and this conversation. So let me give a quick introduction of each of them. Klaudia Oliver is our moderator. She sees herself as a cultural alchemist, tending to the strange magic that holds us all together. She's the founder and chair of the Calaca Festival in San Miguel de Allende in Guanajuato, Mexico, which is an arts and culture organization that seeks to foster meaningful experiences through collective participation. The organization explores, honors, and reveres traditions surrounding Dia de los Muertos in Mexico. She's also a cultural leader in her community, negotiating relationships between artists, tourism, government, and community initiatives. She completed her MA in Cultural Sustainability at Goucher in 2021, where she explored opportunities for sustainable travel rooted in ethical, community-based experiences to build relationships and understanding across cultures. Karen Ann Hoffman is a Haudenosaunee raised beadwork artist and an enrolled citizen of the Oneida Nation of Wisconsin. She is the beadwork student of Samuel Thomas and his mother, the late Lorna Hill, of the lower band of the Cayuga Nation, Niagara Falls in Ontario. Karen Ann is a strong advocate of Shawnee Chief Ben Barnes' motto, "Nothing about us without us." She believes in amplifying Native voices in decision-making roles and renormalizing Native art in public places. Her art is in the permanent collections of many places, including the Smithsonian Institution's National Museum of the American Indian, Chicago's Field Museum, the Idle Georgia Museum of Indian and Western Art, the Nerman Museum of Contemporary Art in Kansas, and the Fenimore Art Museum's prestigious Thaw collection, as well as other locations. Most of that, especially for me anyway, she's a 2020 recipient of the National Heritage Fellowship Award, which is given by the National Endowment for the Arts and is our nation's highest form of recognition for traditional artists. Asiyah Kurtz, originally from Kentucky, now lives in South New Jersey, where she serves as director of Camden Fireworks, an arts organization dedicated to fostering social change. Asiyah is an applied anthropologist and graduate researcher in the field of cultural sustainability. She received her MA in cultural sustainability from Goucher College in 2022. You can see a pattern here. And received the Rory Turner Prize for Best Capstone in cultural sustainability for her innovative and visionary exploration of the inequities of arts economy tools in assessing the vitality of the arts in communities with fewer financial resources. She also served on Camden's City Council while she was in graduate school. So I think she has some good insights into public policy. She's a self-taught maker and quilter. And so Asiyah is accustomed to taking seemingly disparate items and weaving them together to create solutions that address macro issues. So those are our speakers. And I am happy to turn it over now to Klaudia to get us started. Thank you all and welcome, and thank you all for being here.
Hi, everyone. So thank you so much, Amy, and thank you, the other Amy as well. It is a great pleasure to be with you, and what wonderful participation. We're going to start off today with Karen Ann Hoffman telling us a presentation. We're going to do this for both Karen Ann and Asiyah. And so, Karen, I'd like to turn this over to you so that we can then see your presentation, and then we'll have a discussion following both presentations. Over to you, Karen Ann.
Sounds great. Thank you so much, Klaudia. And thank you all
It's a pleasure.
For inviting me to this.
Of course.
So thank you for that. First slide, if we're ready. Anima Anilia. Pakakua nukinata Karen Ann Hoffman, mo communication. Oniota aka makesane in Ian. My name is Karen Ann Hoffman, and I'm a Haudenosaunee raised beadworker. And I really am glad to see everybody here tonight. Next slide, please. I believe in a few things, and I believe that Native art has been on Turtle Island for a very long time. Native art has been on Turtle Island for a very long time. And I believe that Native art is at a minimum 4 things. I believe that Native American art in its highest forms is beautiful. I know that it's intentional. I know that it can be deeply meaningful, but I also believe, for the purposes of our discussion tonight, that Native American art on this continent has been, can be, and will be politically powerful. Next slide, please. Native art has existed here on Turtle Island in a variety of forms, but in the very, very early days, some of the work was these bas-relief sculptures, these mounds as they're known. Some call them burial mounds. This is an example out of Wisconsin of something called an effigy mound. So let me tell you a little bit about these bas-relief sculptures, these mounds. They're made of dirt, and they're brought to the landscape by the community. And they're agreed upon and organized and developed in these shapes and forms. And some of these forms are conical mounds. And so they're what they sound like. They're cones, they're piles. Some of them are linear mounds, and they're long and they're stretched out. The ones that interest me are called effigy mounds, and that's what you're looking at now. Effigy mounds are mounds in the shapes of living things. And these, I think, are beautiful. But next slide, please. The one that really interests me is the man mound who lives outside of Baraboo, Wisconsin. He is, I think, an incredible figure.
Give me zip codes in McAllen, Texas.
Oh, in Texas, I don't know your zip codes.
505 70.
I'm sorry, I'm hearing somebody else in the background looking for zip codes. So it took me off my game. But I want to talk about this man mound. I want to talk about him. And I want to say that he was built probably 1,000 years ago. And he was built by a community of artists and artisans all cooperating together. These mounds that I've been showing you were at one time the dominant forms of art on this landscape. 95% of the mounds ever built in the Midwest have been destroyed. And of the very few that are left, 95% of them have been vandalized. If Native art was not a powerful, persuasive political tool, why then is there state-sanctioned vandalism of our early art forms, as you see in front of you here? The man mound, when he was created, was 260 feet long. At some early point in the development of settlement here in Wisconsin, a decision was made in the late 1880s to erase him at the knees. He was cut off at the knees, and a road was put through him. What you see, that gray line, is actually a county road. Next slide, please. So yes, I believe in the power of Native art in public spaces. Next slide. And I think it's important that this public art be in spaces that have easy access to the broadest of audiences, and that these public displays of Native art are by, for, and from Native peoples. I think that that is where the power is. Next slide, please. In addition to my own work, I am committed, as Amy said in the introduction, to renormalizing Native art on the landscape. It was just a couple of years ago, I was invited by my city to give them some feedback on diversity in Stevens Point, Wisconsin, and whether or not the community was welcoming to people of color. As I sat down on the public square, I responded to that question by saying, you know, I look around me on your public square and I see no less than 4 murals and 5 bronze plaques celebrating the genocide of my people. I look all around this county that I live in, and there was not one at that time, piece of Native art on the landscape, nor were there any names left from our long occupation. And it occurred to me that that needed to change. So this is the first piece of change that actually my husband started. It's a 17-foot sculpture, a steel sculpture of a Menominee-style canoe in a racing action. This canoe is placed in the middle of the park, and the park is actually built on top of an ancient Menominee racing village. I thought it was important that the people who walk through that park every day know that they're walking on and over an erased civilization. Next slide, please. And art, I think, is the way to do that. The next piece of public art that I tried to shepherd was about 40 miles away, but still in the county. There was a call for public art, and that public art was supposed to be murals, and those murals were supposed to celebrate the women's suffrage amendment. And I know that the Haudenosaunee were extremely influential during the suffragette movement. And so I convinced the people who are sponsoring these murals to hire Christopher Sweet, who you see in the foreground, an incredible Ho-Chunk and White Earth Ojibwe artist. He created this amazing mural dedicated to the strength and the cooperation of Native women as we were demonstrating our political power to the suffragettes of the 1920s. His cousin, Denise Sweet, also an Ojibwe woman and a one-time Wisconsin poet laureate, created this poem specifically for this installation, and it was painted on the side of a barn that still exists. So that was the second and third pieces of Native public art that we're putting back on the landscape. Next slide, please. But that wasn't enough to me. My local university was actually built on a mass Native grave. And that had been known since those graves were dug in the 1860s, and that university was built in the 1890s, right on top of those graves. And as the city grew and expanded, those graves were not only built on to put on a university, but they were also dug up for a quarry and then turned into a garbage dump. So right under the feet of our local scholars, we have Native graves buried under garbage from the 1880s. It was important to me that that change, the awareness of that change. We started with this really small sign and this really important prayers and ribbons tied to that sign. Next slide, please. And through a lot of persuasive action, a lot of persistence, we finally convinced the university to again hire a muralist. And this is now on the side of a university building overlooking those graves. Now, every piece of student orientation is including a stop at this grave site. All the parental information that goes out in student recruitment notes that the University of Wisconsin in Stevens Point is built on a mass Native grave. That's the power of public art. Next slide, please. The most recent thing that I've been able to shepherd is at a local park called Lake Emily Park. Now, Lake Emily had long been known for being a home to those conical mounds that we first talked about. But those mounds, they were ignored, they were played upon, they were preyed upon. In fact, back in about 100 years ago in 1923, a local federation of women's clubs took those mounds and they dug a hole in the middle of them and they poured a bunch of concrete in the middle of them and they put brass pack on the top of them and they declared, God darn it, there's Indian mounds here. And as Ben Barnes says, nothing about us without us. And those were not our voices of the way we care for our dead. And so that bothered me. And so I used my friendship with a local archaeologist, and he used his status as sitting on a local parks board. And we approached the Portage County Parks Commission and presented the idea of hiring a Native sculptor so that a Native voice could speak about those graves there at Lake Emily. And just this weekend, we had a dedication of the sustainers who are there to oversee the dead, but also communicate with the living. Next slide, please. I'm so pleased to say that that dedication was even attended by Wisconsin's governor, who took time out of his day to come down, walk with us, speak with us, eat with us, and spend time understanding that art has power and it can bring us together as community, even over very difficult issues. Final slide, please. And so, yeah, my name's Karen Ann Hoffman. I'm a Haudenosaunee raised beadworker. I'm the student of Samuel Thomas, for whom I am very grateful, and his late mother, the late Lorna Hill. And the one thing that they taught me is there is a reason for the art that we do. The world is full of pretty things, they told me, and that's fine. But art and Indians and the way we move through the world is here to make a difference. Thank you.
Thank you so much. This is fantastic, fantastic. Karen Ann, thank you. I appreciate this, and we will get back to you to discuss this. Up next, we have Asiyah Kurtz, the director of Camden Fireworks. And please, over to you.
Thank you so much, Klaudia, and thank you, Karen Ann, for paving the way for me to kind of chime into this conversation. I have given my presentation to the Goucher crew to run for me, so I will wait for that to queue up. But I wanted to welcome you, those of you whom I know and those of you who will watch this in the future. I want to welcome you to this conversation. My name is Asiyah Kurtz, and I am the executive director of Camden Fireworks based in Camden, New Jersey. I am not seeing my screen. There we go. All right. Let's see if we can get that queued up.
Are you seeing the slide?
I am, but I'm not seeing it in presentation mode.
Oh, okay. Let me stop sharing.
Sure.
And
Or if I need to run it, I can do that as well.
so this is what I have. And it's in the sliding down mode.
Okay, well, I will, if you can give me the access to do that.
To share, yeah.
If you hear any noise in the background, we're actually having a Pride, BIPOC Pride event. So just disregard any noise you hear in the background. Let's see if I can get mine queued up. Okay, and I'm going to share with you. Thumbs up, Karen Ann, if you can see my screen. Awesome. So my name is Asiyah Kurtz. As I said, I'm the executive director of Camden Fireworks. I am an applied anthropologist. I have to make one minor correction to Amy's intro. I'm from Memphis, Tennessee, not Kentucky. That's the other South. I'm in the Mid-South. So it's a little bit different. But one thing I wanted to point out about where we are in Camden is we are very much thinking about negotiating space and centering community. And the way that we do that is really through a cultural lens, hence cultural sustainability playing a large part in what we do and how we do it. So let's get going. My organization was founded in 2016, so we're just about 7 years old, and our mission is to use art to create social change. What does that look like for us here in Camden? A place that has been overburdened environmentally, that has been disinvested, that has been economically depressed, that's had a lot of terrible things done to it in the name of capitalism. That means that we have to disrupt in a very profound way the way that things are going, that we have to reshift and recognize the power that is within the community here. That approach includes one of 3 components that primarily drives the rest of them. So environmental justice is the The biggest threat to this organization and to this neighborhood where we live and work, Camden Fireworks is based in a neighborhood called Waterfront South that is literally on the Delaware River, but we are separated from that resource by industry that pollutes. So what we do is we use the environment because it affects us all as a way to provoke dialogue, to create discussion, and hopefully create change that's positive for the community. We have immersive exhibitions, we have workshops, but we also talk about sense of place. We talk about creative place keeping. What does it mean to be in this place at this time? And we talk about who we are. How do we identify and how do we belong? How are artists that we work with working to represent themselves to the creative community? One of those ways that we do that is with public art. This is a project that's called A New View Camden. What we did is we worked as curators. We identified 6 sites in the city of Camden where people were coming into the city and illegally dumping. So instead of taking their trash where it's supposed to be, they were literally bringing it to Camden City in neighborhoods, in our community, and just leaving their waste. We took on those sites, we worked with the city to clean them up, and we did things like commissioned robots to be created from some of that. We had murals installed. This is a mural that is kind of a montage of a lanternfly, the spotted lanternfly, which is not very great for produce and for crops in New Jersey, but that is part of what the environment is. And so these new artists painted their first mural ever in this project. And this is my little boy, Joel. He is atop it's called the Invincible Cat, but it is a very large structure that is created from recycled hoods from cars. So we do that not only with public art installations, but some of those, the mural that was painted in the previous slide, we had this 100-foot long alley next to our gallery that we call the Allery, because we're going to bring the art out into the public spaces. And we installed a wood fence and we said, this is a mural. You tell us what a beautiful whole Camden looks like. So these artists came up with this idea of Camden Lot, which is a play on Camelot. It's a place where change happens, where it's beautiful, where it's nature is healing, and we wanted them to feel invested in that project. So from the beginning to the end, this was completely their idea and their work. We also have exhibitions. This exhibition is Eric James Montgomery, who is an artist in our firehouse here. He took beautiful photographs of Camden residents amidst a backdrop of trash. And then to create this immersive experience, he went out on the corners and pulled in trash that people had left. Tires, air conditioners, just all a mattress. He pulled it in so that people could enjoy art, but understand what we contend with every day. We also have workshops. So we not only host cultural events, but we want to reach people in ways that resonate with them. Food is very culturally relevant. So we partnered with a Vietnamese American woman to do vegan cooking. So we have urban farms, we have vegan cooking, we've done horticulture classes. We also have engaged the public and community created art. In this exhibition or this workshop, we took in frames that someone had, windows and frames that people had dumped in the community, and we made art of them and we hung them from the ceilings. And it was like this gorgeous experience of seeing what people can do with found objects. We have also delved a bit into digital media. We recognize how prevalent these environmental events are in our community. Metal fires, recyclers not recycling, just dumping things in the neighborhood. And so we created this series of workshops where people from the community could come in and have conversation. They could cut silhouettes and create this movie. So essentially we took paper and we created a movie. It's a shadow theater short film that talks about what happened after this huge metal fire that affected many of us. So our ethos is that if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. The W in fireworks is capitalized because, as Karen Ann said, our art has to do work. We have a mission that we will use art to create social change, and change does not happen without provocation. We are not yet at the point of privilege where we can just make art for the sake of making pretty things. We have to make art that really provokes change and encourages dialogue. And so we want to do that in partnership with other people, other artists, other communities. And that's why I think it's so critical to have this conversation today. So I want to thank you for listening to this little brief intro. I'm looking forward to having this conversation from here on.
Thank you. Am I back on?
Yep.
Thank you so much, Asiyah. That was fantastic. Ladies, thank you so much. And I guess by now we're going to begin a general conversation. If anyone would like to comment or add to the discussion, please, Amy is moderating and we'll be happy to include you in the conversation. Yeah, absolutely. Great job, ladies. So one of the things that comes to mind is a wonderful, one of the quotes that I followed for a while. It was that the role of the artist is to make the revolution irresistible. And that is Tony Kadebambara. And so this, to me, in both of you, you're both committed to community collaborative methods and also art as a means to transcend societal norms and to then influence policy and change. For each of you, a question: what do you feel is one of the, how can I say, how do we feel that we can further, for example, today you're doing a Pride event, as there are some of the policies which are less than appealing in other places in the States. How do we feel that some of these interventions or conversations can further to get to policy change? What are your opinions on it?
Well, one thing that I really appreciated about what Karen has said is nothing for us without us.
Completely.
What I find is that policies are created because certain voices, certain people are not in the room. And so to create policies that are harmful, that means you have to keep people out of the circle of influence. And so what we do is we really interrogate that. We are very upfront and unapologetic about being inclusive of voices that are marginalized, inclusive of bodies that are misused, inclusive of people who may be on kind of the edges of society for no other reason except for maybe they don't have housing or maybe they have substance use disorders. So we will not toe the line when it comes to holding up processes and policies that harm people. And the way that that happens is because those folks are not part of the decision making. So we, in our practice, in everything that we try to do, we orient where the power is coming from. We share the microphone, we give the platform, we elevate in every way possible. And share our power, essentially. We recognize the position that we hold And so the only way that change is going to happen is that we cede power to people who may not have it.
I think that's really interesting about ceding power, because I'm not saying you're wrong, because obviously what you're doing is working and it's amazing. Thank you for sharing it. But for me, it's been my experience that, there was a time when we were 100% of the population on this Turtle Island. And now when I look in my own little community of Stevens Point, Wisconsin, I find that the Native population is 0.018% of the population. So we have been effectively erased from our homeland. What I find is necessary for me to make change is a couple of things. I always say you got to show up where you're not wanted, and you just got to keep being there and keep giving that message in as good a way as possible. Because the goal for me is to get people to, hopefully willingly, but often begrudgingly at first, the powers that be got to give up their power. They got to give me some. They got to give me some, because they took it from me to begin with, took it from us. And they can't have it all. I want some back for our people. And I think that you're right. We need to be in places of power. So I don't want to come and have some board rubber stamp me. I want to build the board. I want to populate it with people that are like-minded of my goals. And so, it has to be done delicately, but it is important to give people who have power the reason to give some up. Sometimes that power is money. Sometimes that power is a vote. Sometimes that power is a piece of land. Sometimes it's a fence, right, that you can paint on. But you gotta be willing to give it to us to say what to do with it, not to tell your community what to paint. Just to buy you the paint and get the heck out of the way.
Yeah, I would 100% agree with that. I want to make one point of clarification. When I'm talking about ceding power, I'm talking about the institutional power that I have running my organization. I want to cede that to people who live in this city, people who are culture bearers. That's the power sharing that I'm talking about. So one thing that we're working on that I'm super excited about is we are about 5 blocks south of the only methadone clinic in the city of Camden. And that clinic used to be downtown across from this well-known, well-funded public university, and they didn't want that there. And so they moved it to our neighborhood because why not dump it there? And so the community, the people who lived here did not want that to occur because they knew what was going to happen. Not that they didn't want people with substance use disorders to be here, but they don't want people who prey on people with substance use disorders to be here. And so what we have done is we have identified people in this vulnerable population, people who have come into our gallery to see art, but not when anyone else is around. They will come and they will build relationship with us. And so we are engaging them in this project to essentially remap the neighborhood. We're going to give them a disposable camera and a field journal and say, tell us where you feel the least safe. Because if it doesn't feel safe for you, it probably doesn't feel safe for anyone else. And so using that information will allow us to leverage our power, our resources, intervene with the government here to say, this needs to serve this group because it serves all of us.
So I think what's cool about that is you are a person who has infiltrated that power structure. And once you're in those decision-making, that's what I always say, I want artists to be in decision-making positions, not consultative positions, decision-making, check-writing positions. You know, that's the power that I think we want. But what I love about your automobile hood cat, and what I love about your robot, and what I loved about your murals is what I think the art that I put up does as well. It reaches those people for free who wander by, and they might not be sure what they think. They might not want to sit down and have a conversation with me because I might be a little threatening, who knows, you know, but what they can do is use art as a really safe portal to engage in very difficult thought conversations with themselves and with whomever it is that they come to interact with the art with. And there is the power of art. I don't need to be there to yap at them. The art and their own selves will develop this conversation. And so by you putting that art out where people don't have to pay money to go look at it, that's a big deal. That's a big deal. Not every family's got $10 a head and parking and money to get downtown, go to the fancy schmancy. Art to be where we live. And I'm really proud of you for doing that. Really proud.
Thank you. Thank you. You know, I was thinking back to the slide that I presented with Eric James Montgomery's exhibition where he pulled all these things in that people have dumped. And we use that to reach politicians in northern New Jersey to say, come see what we're dealing with. And as a result of that exhibition, of that art, of those conversations, I testified with the state Senate to increase the penalties and fines to the people who are dumping on us. And it won, like, it garnered unanimous support in a bipartisan committee. In New Jersey,
Because it's the right.
that doesn't happen.
Oh, do you live in Wisconsin too? I mean, you're right. Bipartisanship is not as common as I wish it were. But you did something that I think is really an important strategy, and something that I think we can all build on, is you persuade the people, let them come to their own decisions. But once that groundswell happens, the powers that be, politicians, they know where their bread is buttered. And so they respond to the groundswell of voter influence. And we make change because our neighborhood, our neighbors, our people want change. And that's the way we get for our people when our people need, not what somebody from 50,000 feet assumes that we need. This is bottom up change. That's change that's effective. I think that's such a smart strategy for you.
It absolutely is. I wanted to mention, for example, also in terms of, mural and access to underserved neighborhoods through mural art. When we did La Calaca a few years back, in terms of raising awareness, for years we worked with the Day of the Dead imagery, and we actually just were surprised at how much talent there was within the young muralists that took over the city. But in terms of utilizing this moment to bring ecological awareness as well, one of our more successful campaigns was when we turned the lens towards, instead of just doing Day of the Dead imagery, we asked the young artists to do images of extinct animals or nearly extinct animals. And that was so successful in bringing this type of awareness towards really, really completely underserved artistic places. And also to map how I actually did some of the ethnographic documentation then, and how this affected and how this awareness through art actually worked to instill a sense of caring, not just for the environment, but also for the planet itself. So it's a very, very powerful thing that each person, you guys are both doing, in creating this awareness and care for ourselves, care for our culture, and care for our planet. Extremely effective.
I also have another kind of mission that's important to me, and You talk about underserved communities, and that means a lot of different things in a lot of different ways. But when I think about Native American communities, I feel that the numbers will bear me out that the percentage of museum visitorship that is Native is quite small and often zero. And I get a lot of museums who come to me and they're like, you know, how can we increase the visitorship from your, you know, from the Native American community? And some of it is financial barriers and transportation barriers, but a lot of it is that feeling that you were talking about not feeling welcome, not feeling safe. You know, it doesn't have to be a dangerous place to not feel safe. It can be an unwelcoming place or a place that you feel you're not welcome. And so it is a passion of mine to have my people understand that, you know, we belong every flipping where. We belong in any museum, any gallery, any public space. That's our space too. And so I think while it's really important to bring art to underserved communities, I also think it's really important that our communities invade these art spaces and remind the people who run that they serve us as well. And we serve them by bringing all of this magic that will
I
benefit.
100% agree with you. I
Yeah.
100% agree with you. One thing that I'm thinking about is we get that question often. How can we, and you know, how can we invite in the Black community, the Latin community, the BIPOC community? I'm like, well, first of all, you got to do stuff that they care about. Like,
Yep.
you can't do talk like a pirate day and expect them to come. Like, they don't, that is not culturally relevant. So how are you informing yourself about what is relevant, interesting, inclusive to these communities that you want to reach? You can say one thing, but if all your actions are exclusionary, then why are you asking me how to bring you bodies for show? Because
Right.
I am not going to do that.
Right, I agree with you. I can't, a day doesn't go by that I don't get a call from some institution or other. Oh, I'm a Native American performer. All of a sudden, I'm like, what if 1-800 call an Indian? You know, you need to develop these relationships. You need to come visit us where we are, and we are everywhere. We are everywhere. It's hard to find, but you need to do your and you're developing relationships with us. And then, yeah, there's where the magic happens. It's not all our job. Right? Yeah.
Thank you. Ladies, I'd like to open up this conversation to our audience and see if there are any further questions, comments from, this is a wonderful discussion. I'm so inspired. Would anyone else like to offer any, we have only a few minutes. And I'm wondering if there's anyone that would like to chime in to our discussion.
Hi, this is Cecilia, and I'm sorry I'm not on camera right now, but I'm really
Hi,
enjoying.
Cecilia. So lovely.
Hi, Claudia.
My cohort.
This is such an amazing, powerful conversation. And when the comment about museums came up, I was just typing in the chat. To me, a museum is a construct, and it's something that is an artifact of Western European culture that came with folks that invaded the New World. And the whole idea of a cabinet of curiosities is from the position of the person who has the curiosity, not, you know, the folks that they're collecting from. So it seems to me when I go into a museum, it's kind of a collecting place of things.
You just accidentally muted, Cecilia.
How did I do that?
I don't know. There you are. So when
Okay.
you go into a museum, it was, and then you disappeared.
Yeah, when you go to a museum, they're kind of collections of things that the people who were who established those museums were curious about, and the things that came from other people they were curious about. It's not a shared space. Never really felt like truly a shared space.
I wanted to add to that. Cecilia.
Yeah.
When I did we went on an excursion one time with Rob Filoni's class on museums, and
Yeah.
it was wonderful when we went to the Quaker Museum, for example, and saw that part of the exhibit was geared for some of the refugee communities which had been there. So I feel
Oh,
like although
yeah,
they
Sandy
did start,
Springs.
yes, correct. So although I feel like some of these things started off this way, I feel some of the work that's been happening in cultural sustainability is precisely that. How do we make these places be culturally relevant to the communities which they are currently serving? And I do find, that was really a wonderful example, this exhibit that happened from the refugee community that was, now part of this area, and how museums have a wonderful opportunity to be these gathering places, and in what ways can curatorship serve the actual community and make the places be vibrant and relevant instead of being this sort of like cabinet of curiosities? How do we transform these spaces? And as you're doing it in Camden, Camden Reframed, how are these places now places of cultural significance for our communities?
Higher.
I think that's
I will say something that we've done is going back to sharing power. We have created this Emerging Curators Initiative where we will specifically go to find people who have never curated a show and say, tell us what you would do and let us pay you and support you. And so the ideas cannot all come from me, because I will create a cultural zoo. I will create something that is not immersive. I will create something that is not specific and relevant. I will create a flat image of a culture and a people. I can't do that. And so to contend with that, I will engage people from that community and pay them for their labor and honor the decisions that they make.
I think that's it. I say hire us. Like you said, Claudia, there is no shortage of talent. There's no shortage of brain power either. And so, you're looking for a native PhD, there are a dozen. Looking for, like you said, an emerging curator, build the pipeline, fill the pipeline, but then don't glass ceiling us. Hire us as museum directors, hire us as exhibit coordinators. We've got the skills, we got the power, and we got the connection to community that will enrich institutions. Hire us, give us the pipeline. Yeah.
Well, ladies, we are now 3 minutes away. I wanted to mention, with the conversation of, a lot of our conversation has been about collaborative, about weaving. As a Day of the Dead specialist, I suppose, I wonder how this conversation can go into both of your communities or both of your organizations. I'd love to talk about, discuss, partner, as well as Goucher. In what ways can the celebration of Day of the Dead, one of my dreams was to actually change policy, and instead of Cinco de Mayo, for example, which is not celebrated in Mexico, by the way, it's celebrated by Americans that like Corona beer. But in what ways can we change policy, perhaps, to make Dia de los Muertos be an official US holiday that can be loved and appreciated by all cultures? I do believe that the Mexican tradition of Dia de los Muertos, or Day of the Dead, is relevant in just discussing or bringing the conversation of death, which is, for me, a universal conversation. All peoples have a tradition of what they do with their dead, and I feel opening up this conversation might be a healing and connective tissue. And yeah, so just putting that out there as we are nearing our time.
Yeah, I love that. We are actually working on a way to engage the community in culturally specific ofrendas. Like, we are inviting people from the Dominican Republic, because we have people from the DR, people from Ecuador, because we have people from Ecuador right here in our neighborhood, and also people from who are Vietnamese. Like, you can come and honor this overarching tradition of offering and remembrance in a way that is specific to your culture. So maybe you don't build an ofrenda. What do you have to offer? So we are working to honor that, to make a place that's inclusive so that we are not continuing to create these flattened characters of different people from different cultures.
That's beautiful. I hear the voices of the dead all the time, which is why I found myself working so much around these mounds and on these graves. I hear them asking. I hear them asking us to pay attention and to learn and to treat one another better. And so I don't belong to an organization in a way that is my power. No one can fire me. No, because I just keep showing up. And so I do that on behalf of those dead because they want us to be better people. And so I love that, Klaudia, that idea of remembering that we have responsibilities to them and that they have things that they're asking of us. And it's not that hard. Just do what you can. Do what you can. And you'll find partners along the way. You'll find them. Like everybody here, I think. Good hearts.
Well, and if I can jump in, you know, one thing you said, Karen Ann, when you were talking at the very beginning was about, you know, reaching out, using your friendships to connect with people who have resources, that can connect with people who have power, that can, you know, create change. And it seems like, I mean, you know, that's something that I think is so much an important part of how we are successful, you know, rather than kind of the butting heads, like what are the resources where we can reach out and reach out and reach out, and those ripple effects of our relationships with each other, to be able to influence decision making at all levels, you know, whether it's in the home, in community, in government, in schools, in church, in, you know, whatever. It's, you know, how do you create those ripple effects of relationships? You know. So I feel like this is way too short, that we could probably talk for another hour at least. And I'm happy to do so, unless you all, you know, need to move on. But I want to, I don't know, does anybody else have any closing thoughts or additional thoughts or other questions from those of you in the audience? Daishana, I'd love to hear a little bit more about the work you're doing in, did you say South Carolina, North Carolina? South Carolina it was, right?
South Carolina. How you doing, everybody? Nice to meet
Good.
y'all. So I did graduate from the University of South Carolina in 2020, COVID grad. But I currently serve as a health educator for our local, I would say health department, but I cover multiple counties. So I serve for the Department of Health and Environmental Control, DHEC, down here. And what I do is I go and I look at what social issues are threatening our communities, what our communities are lacking, and see what policies can we put in place and create that systematic change. So that's what a lot of my work does. And like I said, with me being an artist, that's one thing that I've always wanted to do, was use my art to connect communities. So finding this, I actually was scrolling on Facebook and I saw it pop up and I was like, oh my gosh, I gotta go. So I'm definitely grateful to be here.
Excellent. Yeah, so yes, Rory, that's a great idea. Di, if you want to put your contact information in the chat, I'll be sure to connect you with others of these, because one of the ideas that we've had is to do one specifically around health. So that might be something you'd be interested in, but yeah, so Rory's suggestion is, if, you know, of course, if any of you need to leave, feel free to slip away, but if you want to stay and chat some more or talk some more, there's Asiyah's contact information. I'm happy to stick around and keep the Zoom room open for, okay, good. Di Pearson 7.
Unfortunately, I do have to leave because I've got to get back to our event that's happening
Oh,
downstairs.
sure.
But
Yeah.
this has been so much fun, just kind of getting to brag on the work we do. I don't get to do that enough. So
Right.
this has been really fun. So thank you for inviting me to the conversation and just share with everyone.
Well, thank you so much for sharing your time and for stepping away from an event that you're having right there in your space, which another testament to the fabulous things that you're doing.
Thank you. Take care, everybody.
All right. Thanks, Asiyah. We'll talk
Bye-bye.
soon. Bye-bye.
Yes.
Yeah. Any other thoughts or comments?
I wanted to say a couple things. I mean, first, for both Asiyah and you, Karen, I mean, what extraordinary vibrancy in this work, and a sense of real, like a kind of core truth, and looking power square in the face and trying to understand that. And so art is not just some sort of nicety of life. It's actually a way of making a claim on what is important, and all of the kind of considerations that you've shared and that Asiyah shared about not settling for the story that others have said, but really insisting that story needs to emerge from the deeper truths of who we are as human beings and the legacies that we have been blessed with. I think that's really powerful. I just, one way of thinking about this is actually from the broad framework of sociology of Pierre Bourdieu, and a social field that's created, that is sustained through these mechanisms of power and status. And we find ourselves labeled in that broader kind of production of society and culture. And that sort of rules the roost. That kind of gives us direction about how we are supposed to respond to one another. What is important, I mean, what is absolutely essential, I think, is that story that people can claim and tell their own stories, right? And that actually shifts the whole system ideal, potentially. That the story becomes a different story, that the people that are controlling the system, that they're changing, but that the story is changing. I think the story is changing. I think it's important that the art has a function of power. It's people power. It's political power. It also is really important, and I think both of you talked about this, that there's something really critical about joy, about revitalization, about connection, about honoring our part of human communities and of a broader community, a natural community. So it's always going to have multiple functions. It can bring people together. It can also be a way that the whole kind of cultural system changes. Anyway, those are some thoughts I had. I really appreciated what you guys had to say, and thank you. And if anybody has any riffs on what I said. go for it, or change the subject too.
Rory, I always love it when you, especially invoking the, the power of joy. And yeah, I always, I love that. And I think, however, and I think art can also, and you said this too, really invoke, can be a portal, as maybe Ann said, to really difficult conversations, or maybe that was Klaudia that said that, but I forget which one of you, but that to also face to be a way to talk about the negative, to talk about what's not joyful right now.
Yeah.
And, maybe with a long-term goal of achieving a kind of joy, or achieving a kind of peace or contentment in the world. But yeah.
So I'm Haudenosaunee, and one thing we believe in is balance, but not balance of left and right, up and down, black and white, here and now. It's a balance that plays out over time, across space, so I'm not looking for joy in the long run. I'll take it where I find it. But I understand that pain and those problems exist as well. I just, because that's the way they teach us, I just know that I don't need to live to see it, but I just know that over time, all things will come to a balance. And I don't even know what balance means, but it's not necessary that I know. It's necessary that I work to, they call them our original instructions, and that's to live right in the world, to follow those core concepts that you were talking about. And when you see something amiss, I don't need anybody's permission to address it. I think that's another place of power that comes to me by being a Haudenosaunee woman. We're a matrilineal society, and our women are in charge. And they've always been in charge. And we use our men like you would use chess pieces. We put them in place, tell them to do certain things, because they do have certain skill sets that are necessary for the community. But when it comes right down to it, we don't have to ask anybody's permission for anything.
Right.
And that sense of power that is a great luxury for me. And I do understand when people need to work within institutions and get that paycheck and get the next grant to continue, because they've got people relying on them. I understand that changes the way they can flex it. So I know that I'm in a very privileged position, but as long as I find myself there, what the heck, right? What the heck? What are they gonna do?
Well, it is amazing how and I think this is sort of one of the points you're making, Roy, was how our structures are so deeply embedded, that you work for the nonprofit, or you get the paycheck, and you got to write the grants, and and you don't even lift your head up. I mean, unless you have the luxury, it's hard to lift your head up and see a different way of approaching it. To see that, Karen Ann is just going to show up, and nobody needs to invite her. She doesn't need to be invited, and she doesn't need to be told to show up, but she just knows to show up. And, I think, like, you don't know quite what balance is, but at the same time, you know it when you feel it, right? When things are balanced in your world, you know it. When they're not, yeah, that's interesting. Fascinating. So, Rory, there are definitely some good uses for men in the world.
Oh,
I'm really good at taking out the trash, and I can kill
Yeah.
rats.
Good.
Um, one thing that
Just don't dump the trash in Camden.
I promise, I
Right.
promise, no trash dumping. Um, one thing that I learned about in a course years ago when I was an undergraduate is that the leaders of the Angolan Revolution against Portuguese colonial rule were poets, right? They were poets, and I think that there's something that's kind of what I was trying to get at with this idea of joy is there's inspiration in the arts around which people can have that genuine embodied feeling of being part of something which is sacred. You know, it's justice is sacred.
Agreed.
And that it is through those things that the kind of the energy of a sort of counter story, you know, counter narrative, you know, becomes not just words, becomes something else. And
Yeah.
I think that's really, it can be really a powerful thing. One thing that I've also I've noticed in my own career somewhat, and it's more kind of on a pragmatic level, is if there is something where there's that kind of genuine quality that, you know, look, this is not some sort of like condescending gesture to traditional peoples, or where there's you know, a kind of highly sort of slick museum presentation of something. But if you can invite people in power to get a sense of what really is going on with community, then that might shift how they will make decisions. You know, I have to say, Karen, that I think you're like saying, you know, don't just hire us, but don't just hire us. Let us lead, you know, is even more important. But I think there's also ways where people can kind of get that something special is happening in communities. And, you know, I think of my former boss at the Maryland State Arts Council, who's working at the Mid-Atlantic Arts Foundation, Teresa Colvin. You know, there were times where we were able to get her to think about things in different ways by the experiences that she had. So anyway, I mean, that's a tactical thing.
No, you know, and I think that gets back to the whole point of tonight's conversation, which is to think about, you know, how do we influence people in power to make changes? And I had the same experience, Rory, where Philip Horn, who used to be the director of the Pennsylvania Council on the Arts, somebody brought him to it was Barbara Rahm, brought him to the National Heritage Awards ceremony, Karen Ann, back in 1978 or 80 or something like that. And he was so moved. He knew nothing of traditional arts before that. He was a performing arts person. He was so moved by the traditional arts and artists and that whole ceremony. It completely changed the way that he did his work. And when he became director of the Pennsylvania Council on the Arts, he was one of the most ardent supporters of traditional arts, and was one of the people that, you know, kept bugging the NEA to create the folk arts infrastructure program that now populates most of the states in the nation to support folk arts programming at the local level, you know. So that arts experience of sitting, you know, seeing the power and beauty of traditional arts and the impact of it changed one single person's mind and influenced, you know, the support of folk arts for decades, you know.
Yeah, and I think that illustrates, Amy, you know, a lot of what we've been talking about tonight. Not all up to traditional artists to go out and find all the powerful people. Powerful people can come to us.
Yeah.
And when they us, they will be moved. They will
Yeah,
be moved because the art is
exactly.
that powerful. And
Mhm.
then we can develop these allyships
Yep.
with people who have influence, power, access, and
Mhm.
they can open doors.
Mhm.
And I'm great with them opening doors, but then once we're in, we need to be given reign and power and leading ability and that kind of thing. Right, right.
Mhm.
So it is this beautiful ballroom dance that the partnerships need to do together.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I think that's so important.
Yeah,
Because
that's great.
that those guys know about infrastructure and budgets and, you know, whatever. No disrespect, but what you do when you run a nonprofit, that's a skill set that I neither have nor am interested in developing.
Right.
But I
Yeah.
know it's necessary for me to achieve the goals that I have.
Yeah.
So if I can find somebody who's really good at that, really stays in their lane about that, and they can let me do what I'm really good at and stay in my lane together, all of a sudden
Mhm.
the governor is coming to see your dedication of this kind of controversial piece of art.
That is so cool that you got the governor there.
And now there is conversation about expanding policy to protect graves and burial mounds and waterfront and county
Awesome.
park. And yeah, so
Mhm.
it's that.
Yeah.
It-
Yeah. And yeah, that goes back to relationships, doesn't it?
Mhm, mhm.
Rory.
Oh, just, and also like there's a culture to nonprofit management that is itself a thing, you know, that it sort of often becomes invisible. And
Mhm.
I think there's got to be, I mean, I think you're right. And that's kind of one of the things that was a notion around this cultural sustainability program is you've got to learn those tools. You've got to learn those things, but not be bamboozled by them, not believe that that's the way the world has to be.
Mhm.
But be able to work with them to, you know, help with resources, to help to use the best of some of the ideas of you know, reason and accountability and all of that, but not to sort of like, oh, the world needs to be a corporation. I mean, these are
Right.
nonprofit corporations. We don't need corporations. We need kin.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah.
My dad was a symphony conductor, and so I spent a lot of time in a lot of rehearsal halls when I was a kid. And one thing I grew to understand was that, you know, it's not necessary for everybody to be first violin. You need that
Mhm.
in the back row. And the role of the maestro is to recognize all those strengths and know when to bring each one forward.
Yeah.
Because it makes the music. And I just really believe people, I think everybody should do a couple things. I think everybody should wait tables. I think everybody should play in an orchestra or a band or a chorus. You know, I think these are core experiences that would all make us better people.
Right.
Yeah. Oh, well, thank you again so much. I really have enjoyed this conversation. And thank you, Klaudia, for moderating for us and asking your great questions and giving your perspective. Karen Ann, your experiences and your thoughtfulness is just inspiring. It's wonderful. So
Yeah, this has been so cool. Thank you so much. I really love what you just said. We need not corporations, we need kin.
yeah,
That was great.
yeah.
I was like, stop the car.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things I've been saying is kind of similar. We don't need more wealth. We need more well-being. You
Ooh,
know, it's kind
you
of the same.
guys, my goodness. I love it. Thank you so much. I'm so reinvigorated thanks to this. And sometimes I'm just like, stop it, you know, and then just participating in something like this really reinvigorates me, and as well as opens new avenues and new ways of going forth through collaborative effort and through, you know, Max being a lifeline.
Yeah, great.
Guys,
All right,
I'm
we'll
gonna
go
sign
make
off.
marmalade.
I'm gonna go make some marmalade.
Okay.
I'm gonna
Wonderful.
send you some. Bye, everyone. Take
Okay.
care.
All right. Yeah.
Bye, everyone. Thank you
Yeah.
so much.
So, Karen and Di Pearson's asking for contact information for you if you want to put it in the chat.
Oh, give me a second. I'll open up that chat. So don't make us go away.
I won't close.
I like beads way better than I like computers. So give me
And
a second.
Klaudia, you are SMA Cultural Ambassador. Oh, she's gone. She
Thanks,
disappeared. Yeah. I'll have to. Let me see if I can find it. I think it's SMA Cultural Ambassador. Let me just go to my email really quickly and. Yeah, here it is. Copy. And there you go. So that's Klaudia. SMA is San Miguel de Allende, cultural ambassador at gmail.com. All right. Well, thank you all. This has been a wonderful conversation. And before I close, I want to copy the chat. So I make sure I keep everybody's emails. So let me go to here. It's not showing up for me. There it is down.
Bye, everybody.
Take
Bye,
care.
Rory. Thanks. We'll
Nice
talk
to
to you
meet you.
soon. Di, it was nice to meet you. Hope I'll see you again.
Oh,
Definitely nice to see y'all as well. Thank y'all.
I know.
Yeah,
Grateful I came across it. I really enjoyed this.
good,
Really enjoyed it.
good.
And I look forward to some more. But
All
I'll
right,
be in
awesome.
contact for sure.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Oh, here, let me really quickly share this slideshow from current slide. Let's see, is it going to open? Let me just give you really quickly my final slide, which has my contact information on it if you want to check that out, if you want to reach out to me.
I'm gonna actually take a picture of it.
There you go.
There you go.
All right, Karen Ann, thank you. You know what? I see you all the time in these LTN meetings, and I always appreciate what you say. But it was really great to have you all to myself for an hour and a half.
Party is always better, right?
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah.
I
Great.
enjoyed it so much. Thank you
All
for
right.
asking. It was great.
Sure, I'm going to be in touch with you again, I'm sure. So.
Okay, that sounds wonderful.
All right. Good night, everybody. Take care.
Good
Good night.
Okay. Bye-bye.